Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Mercedes are taking one positive away from the dismal weekend they had at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, confirming that at least next year's car concept will be significantly superior on paper to what they've had this year with the clearly fundamentally flawed W14. After last year's win in Brazil, they thought the zero-pod concept of the W13 was the way to go. That has proved disastrously miscalculated for this entire season. Toto Wolff does admit though that despite being more conservative than they could have been on the right eye level of their car this weekend, that was far from the only reason where their car was disastrously slow at Interlagos. Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, this is a picture that Charles Leclerc more than likely did not take, but it's still kind of a funny picture that the marshals here around the track were posing with Charles Leclerc's Ferrari after it was out of the Grand Prix before the Grand Prix even began. And this comes at not a great time for Ferrari because reportedly they are beginning contract negotiations with Charles Leclerc. Rumours that this already happened or that the deal has been done, I don't know, I guess we'll see. But if there's one time to begin negotiating with Leclerc about a Ferrari extension, this weekend is probably not at the top of his list in terms of good weekends. In fairness, he went, P1, P1, P2 in qualifying over the last 3 weekends, but the did not start, the did not, disqualified right back in Austin has not been a great few weeks for him. And sure, Ferrari wants to secure his services for the long term. Is that in Leclerc's best interests? Possibly yes, but, where else could he go? Maybe Mercedes when Hamilton called it a day, maybe Red Bull, but seems unlikely. Ferrari seems to make the most sense, but still, Leclerc and Ferrari, it's been a combination which has worked at times, but there have certainly been plenty of low points. They also dropped this Scuderia Ferrari, something called dropping tomorrow, where, here are the two drivers. I don't know whether there's anything to this. I'm pretty sure Giuliano De Chessa said that it's basically like a merchandise thing, so I doubt that that's going to be like, oh, we've re-signed Leclerc and Sainz for the next several years. Doubtful. There were rumours a while ago that probably Leclerc will get re-signed and maybe they'll get Albon as their second driver when his contract is up going into the 2025 season, so I guess we'll stay tuned for that one. There was also this account that you guys may have seen, so this isn't actually Charles Leclerc, just to make that very clear, but, this got quite a lot of traction on social media, so I thought I'd mention it that this actually isn't Leclerc's real account, doing the classic Piastri copy-pasta from shortly over 1 year ago. So Brazil was an interesting Grand Prix, certainly for Mercedes. Toto Wolff said it was his worst Grand Prix weekend that he's had in 13 years at Mercedes, and even James Allison comments on this as well and says that never in his wildest nightmares could he have imagined a weekend that was this bad. If there are any positives for Mercedes to take away, I suppose you've got to say they at least know they got something drastically wrong and that this car concept is not the one. Toto Wolff, though, did say they considered starting with the pit lane, but considering maximising points, probably made sense to start from where they were. Had they started in the pit lane and made some car setup changes, would they have scored any more points? Maybe, maybe not. They didn't score many on the Sunday anyway, and were kind of blessed, at least in terms of constructor standings, that Leclerc was out before the race even began. Hamilton believes it was to do with the floor not working, and this is the question Mercedes have to answer, and that Toto Wolff believes they will get a big answer at the factory this week, because as far as he's concerned, something was fundamentally wrong with the car. We talked about even before the race began that Mercedes admitted after the sprint race they'd been too conservative in their ride heights. The ride height is too high, the floor produces less downforce, therefore you've got to run more wing, your tyre degradation is worse. That's one of the reasons, one of many reasons, why the Red Bull is so good. The floor works fundamentally very well. They can actually run less wing and just less downforce on their car in general, and therefore be quicker in a straight line, because their floor does a lot of the work. A lot of that is implied by the suspension, and these are things that Mercedes will have to get on top of going into next year. But Toto Wolff said that was not the only reason why they were so, and it makes sense, right? I mean, raising the ride height more conservatively than usual, that should not take you from being the second, maybe third fastest car to being on race pace, literally the 7th fastest car in the Grand Prix this weekend. Like a second off where they feel like they should have been on a lap by lap basis. Lots of that is in tyre degradation. One of the reasons the Red Bull is so good, it's not because it's fundamentally a faster car over a single lap than the McLaren, let's say, because lately they've been pretty neck and neck. It's more so that over the course of a stint, it manages its tyres better, and therefore Verstappen's just able to extract more performance, especially in the latter half of stints. So Toto Wolff says something was fundamentally wrong mechanically. It's not the fault of the rear wing necessarily, necessarily. It's not about the car being slightly too high. We're talking a millimeter or two less. So yeah, he says, all right, maybe we were a millimeter, 2 millimeters more conservative than we might have been on the floor after they got disqualified back in Austin. Mexico, they could run their car nice and low. Not a massive deal because it's not super bumpy around there and therefore you can get away with it a bit more. Brazil can be a bit bumpy, especially down the run to turn 4. So they didn't want to risk a disqualification. Sure, they might have liked to go all out for the win, but they didn't want to get disqualified and lose points to Ferrari, so they decided not to. So whether it's just, they raised the car a couple of millimeters higher and that threw off the entire concept of aerodynamics they have with this new floor design, because clearly the new floor works to some degree. I think we saw that in Austin, we saw that in Mexico. The engineers say that it did. They said that what they saw on track in Mexico, for example, in Austin, was what they'd have expected to see on their wind tunnel simulator data. Whether there's something they just deeply don't understand about why, if they raise the ride height slightly, it throws everything else off, or Toto Wolff is correct that that wasn't really the primary cause. That might have cost them a 10th a lap, but that wasn't costing them a second a lap over the course of a race distance. What is it that's not right? I wouldn't be surprised if we analysed the cars in the next few days and found out there was a mechanical issue in the way that we set them up. I don't know what that would have been. So yeah, definitely concerning for Mercedes. Wolff doesn't really know what was the fundamental issue, but he says that there was some mechanical issue somewhere with the cars, with the setup, that they need to diagnose. And they have a bit of time, right? They can take the cars back to the factory, and all the good people there, as Hamilton and the team loves to say, could do their work on the cars and figure out what was wrong. Because yeah, I'm kind of inclined to agree with Toto that it feels doubtful that a slightly conservative ride height is going to cause this to occur. I mean, look, Red Bull ran a pretty conservative ride height in Austin, and guess what? They won still by a bit of a landslide. And if you look at Red Bull's car that weekend, you can see it was running higher than their competitors, but it didn't cause their car to chew up its tyres like the Mercedes did this weekend. So Toto Wolff does take one positive from this about the trajectory for next year. I think it's quite clear now. Mercedes admitted this after winning in Brazil last year. They thought, we've done it, we've fixed it, boys. This W30, the zero pods, we've finally figured it out. What a machine we've created, and the upgrade in Austin and the other upgrades they brought are the way to go, and finally we're getting what we expected of the zero pod in the first place. Therefore, they painted it black. They came into the new season looking for a vengeance, and guess what? The car was terrible. They saw that in Bahrain, and it didn't take long before they realised, yeah, we're probably not going to win a race this year. And of course, as it stands, that seems like it is the case. Had Mercedes not won in Brazil, had Red Bull got their setup right in the sprint race format that weekend and won the race as they were expected to with Max Verstappen, probably Mercedes changed their concept already. But the one additional year they put into that design has possibly thrown them to the point where they're not going to be competitive in this entire cycle of regulations. That's certainly what Hamilton thinks. The other day he said after the Grand Prix, this time, not last time, that yeah, Red Bull are probably going to stay ahead for the next 2 seasons up until at least 2026. So Wolff says, all right, last year we came out of Interlagos demolishing the competition Saturday and Sunday, and that was like, are we doing the right thing by continuing with the chassis that we have? Now it is clear. This feels horrible for the whole team, and I wish that we could start on the new season and concentrate on the new car, confirming that the trajectory of changing the car fundamentally is the correct trajectory. Now, had they have won this race in a miracle format, would they have said, oh, hang on a second, guys, I think we've nailed it. Let's, carry on with this style design for next year. Like, they already know, and they've already known for a long time, that the Red Bull concept sealing, the deep undercut on the side pods, the anti-dive, anti-squat suspension design, the way that their car is set up is clearly the concept with the highest potential ceiling. McLaren have moved slightly towards that over the course of the season. Look where they are now compared to where they were at the start of the season. So I think, frankly, Mercedes at least should have already known that their car was fundamentally flawed, but the fact that it's fundamentally flawed to such an extent that they can put plasters on it. That's what Toto Wolff said. They're basically just plastering over the wounds of this car. Their chassis is the same. They said at the start of the season, Toto Wolff said, if they had infinite money, if they no budget cap as there was previously, they would have brought an entirely new monocoque to this year's car. They can't afford it, they couldn't do it, and therefore all of their upgrades are just plastering over the problems. And turns out, maybe to such an extent, that despite the flaw apparently working, something was wrong this weekend. They didn't fully understand and still don't fully understand that fundamentally destroys the pace of their car. So clearly the concept is dire. In some respects, it's completely wrong. And I honestly, more I think about it, Toto Wolff's statement that it was their worst weekend ever, at least his worst weekend ever at Mercedes, is probably justified because there's been some bad weekends at Mercedes, but at least on pretty much all of those weekends, they've had pace, or at least they've had the pace they were expecting to have. They might have crashed into each other. They might have, Baku 21, numerous examples, but at least they had pace and were on course to score a good result. This weekend was not the case. So Toto Wolff goes on to say, what we know is we're changing the car completely and we are an outlier compared to the last 8 years after, winning a lot for 8 years in a row, okay, before 2022, where we've been at the front, solid, and with the structure and people to perform at the front. This car, generally, the development of this car is more plasters that we're putting on something that's not right. So giving up on this year's concept, understandably so, and looking forward to starting the new season with that brand new car going into next year. But whatever they discover, if anything, over the next couple of days might well be quite crucial, right? Because if they realize there's some sort of fundamental flaw they did not yet appreciate, that might change their perception of what they want to do with next year's design, how much of a Red Bull it's going to look like when next year's W15 is officially unveiled. And I'm sure there's a lot here for James Allison to ponder. He actually said after the Grand Prix, I just wrote an email back to the factory saying that I feel knocked for 6 by it because we came here, it would have been too much to imagine a repeat of last year because the stars would have had to align, but I thought we'd be troubling the podium. Now you could say, well, you've been undone by your own hubris, but never in my wildest dreams would I've imagined that we'd have had the torrid weekends that we just had. In some ways, there's a comfort in that because we must have just got something wrong and we'll go off and uncover what that was. With a bit of luck, under the lovely thing that racing gives you, a couple of weeks' time, we'll come back and hopefully put it to bed. So in the same way that last year was, despite the victory, was a massive, this was a bad weekend for Mercedes. They won, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm sure they would have much preferred not to win and to understand that for this year's car, they needed to go a different direction. Maybe it's the same story this time around. A torrid weekend for Mercedes that really teaches them, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this needs to be changed, and could send them in the right direction going forwards, right? I mean, Allison talks there about hubris and thinking, oh, well, we're moving in the right direction, we've got it figured out, and then it turns out Red Bull know what they're doing far better than they do and have moved the goalposts significantly further on. So, as I say, in the same way that last year was a good weekend, but in hindsight a bad weekend, maybe this current bad weekend will turn out to be a very positive weekend when Mercedes look back on it in the future. The question, though, is will it be enough for next year? Because, as I've said over the last couple of days, McLaren are positioned quite nicely to challenge Red Bull, potentially even going into next year. The theory is Red Bull have made big strides behind the scenes, and the RB20 is going to be, look, the RB19 will go down as one of the most dominant cars, if not the most dominant in Formula 1 history, but apparently the RB20 won't be too far behind based on the rumours as to what Adrian Newey and co are cooking up behind the scenes. But Lando Norris, the momentum of McLaren is no doubt immense. I mean, what is it? 5 podiums in the last 6 races. Sure, he is now dominating the all-time standings of most points without a victory. Overtook Hülkenberg a while ago, and he's still pushing on. And sure, it's kind of unfortunate for Norris that he lives in an era when Max Verstappen wins everything. But he does say that since the upgrade kit they brought to Austria, he's been the second highest scoring driver on the grid, but Max Verstappen. To consider where they were in Bahrain, in Jeddah, in circuits like that, compared to where they are today, it's been such a miraculous turnaround, really. And for them to be competing with Red Bull at Interlagos is no doubt impressive. Now, sure, Red Bull haven't upgraded much in a long time, but the progression of McLaren is immense. And he actually goes on to say, Norris, that we know that we still have plenty more things to come next year. McLaren seem to understand what's going on. They've brought their car in a very positive direction. None of their upgrades have not worked, right? We've seen Aston Martin, we've seen Mercedes now struggling to understand what's happened this weekend. That doesn't really happen to McLaren. Some weekends recently, McLaren will turn up and think, all right, we probably won't be that strong here, and it turns out they are actually even stronger than they thought, and on the circuits where they think they're good, they tend to be very good. So this is, McLaren seem to be every box you'd want to tick in terms of potentially trying to be a challenger next year. They've got the pit stops. I think that in terms of strategy, McLaren have some work to be done. I know there was even talk this weekend about maybe trying to undercut Max rather than kind of not really going for it, but realistically, I think the McLaren made pretty sensible decisions in the Grand Prix, all things considered. But sure, maybe McLaren can work on their strategy a bit, but they're nailing the pit stops. They got the fastest pit stop ever not that long ago, and Norris says, look, can't really think too much ahead for now, but he reckons that they've got plenty more things to come and they believe they're going in a very good direction. So yeah, definitely interesting. And just a couple of things to close out with here. Firstly, this from Bryson Sullivan on the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So it's going to be a very cold race. It's very interesting timing because it's a Saturday night Grand Prix in Vegas. So it will be very early Sunday morning for us in the UK. And honestly, East Coast, like good luck. Like, cause it's gonna be 1, 2 a.m. East Coast, something like that. Not ideal times for even in the States. I guess if you're in Vegas, it's okay, but it's going to be a Saturday night race. And in, let's say, late November in Vegas in the dead of night, it's going to be cold. And that's why the track might not be great, like Vegas. I don't think it's going to be a good track, but I can't say that I'm not interested to see how it will go. Very high speed, one of the longest straights, if not the longest on the calendar, some of the highest speeds that we're going to get of the season. Massive, DRS zone slipstreaming. And as Bryson says, the slipstream will be even more powerful because the air will be denser at the very low temperatures. So the aero is going to work more efficiently at those, more dense air conditions. So better slipstreams, more downforce. And it's going to be a fascinating challenge given the fact that it's going to be really cold. So yeah, I'm definitely interested. I don't expect a great race, but there's a few reasons why it should be interesting to watch at the very least. It's going to be a spectacle. Whether it's going to be a procession, that's another development, or whether it's going to be this man who has already secured the highest ever percentage for wins in a season, which has broken a 71-year-old F1 record set by Alberto Ascari. He's probably going to pump these numbers up even more significantly than they already are. But very much interested to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.